turn it over to Drashti Modi, the chair of our Student Wellness Coalition, to start off our evening.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Happy Thursday. I like to say it in a fun way because it's Thursday is too boring to say. I am so glad you guys took some time out of your evening to come attend our student wellness meeting. We are so delighted to have Dr. Frazee with us to give all of us aspiring dentists in making some words of wisdom or clinical pearls, as we like to say at school. So we're very excited for this meeting. And I am the co-chair of Student Wellness. So on behalf of our organization, thank you all so much for attending. And thank you, Dr. Frazee, for taking the time out of the schedule to talk to us. I'm going to hand it over to Cameron, who is our treasurer, and he will be moderating the discussion tonight. So thank you.
All right, hey guys. So I'm just going to give a quick little introduction for Dr. Frazee.
I can't wait.
A little story about Dr. Frazee is my family was one of his first patients when he first opened up his private practice back in 2013. Funny enough, my family used to actually hate going to the dentist. And so Dr. Frazee really helped my family get over their fears, especially my sister. And so kind of seeing his work over the years, it further solidified that dentistry is what I wanted to do. And thankfully he's taught me a lot over the years. So if you guys have any questions, you can just put in the chat and I'll be able to read it out to him. But without further ado, here's Dr. Frazee.
All right. Thanks, Cameron. I definitely appreciate it. I don't know that I've actually helped your dad overcome his fear yet. That's still in the works, but we're getting there.
Yeah, he sees you guys too often is the problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, so what I'll do then, I'll just share my screen. I'll start going through the presentation. And if any questions arise, Cameron, just go ahead and read them off. And at any time, we'll take any direction of conversations you guys want to go. Okay. All right. I'm guessing I want to share my screen is what I want to share. Can you see my screen now? Yes. Okay. All right.
You need to enlarge it, make it full screen.
There, is that better? Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right. So when Cameron asked me to do this, or as you guys call him, Cam, I'll have to refer to him as Cam. When he asked me to do this, I just kind of asked real quick, you know, what's it going to be about? What do you want me to present? He said, you know, we just want to kind of know about how you went from, you know, dental student that just graduated to practice ownership and your journey along that way. So of course I titled my presentation, My Journey to Ownership. As we go through it, like I said, any questions at all, please ask away. I'll gladly answer them and I will answer them truthfully. There's no sugarcoating for me. I'll make sure you guys get the absolute honest opinion from me. So without further ado, first things first, I always start with this. You know, I have to say thank you to all of you for taking time out of your evening to attend the event, right? Because if there was nobody attending the event, what would be the point of me sitting here talking to anybody? So thank you guys. Obviously, you guys have busy lives with dental school and families and everything else. So thank you for taking time to listen to what I have to say. Thank you, Cam, obviously, for asking me to do this presentation tonight. It's awesome. You know, I hope you guys get a lot out of it. Thank you so much to my family, especially my wife, for putting up with me through all this craziness over the last 8 years. It really has been quite a journey. When I was, let's see, second year student, the boy on the right is my older boy. He's 10 now. He was 18 months, or no, he was born when I was a second year student. So it's been a crazy time, that's for sure. And my youngest one, Tyson, just keeps us running. Some days I don't know what to do with him, but the second one's always the challenge, I guess. Then also, obviously, last but not least, thank you to our awesome team at our office that, you know, Cam knows they go above and beyond absolutely every day. And I couldn't do what I do without any of our team members. I rely so heavily on them to help us get through the day. And this is an old picture. Actually, we actually have more team members than that now. But this was the most recent team picture I could find. So, our story, obviously what we want to hear about, what we want to talk about. Like I was talking with Leslie before everybody got on the call, it was kind of neat for me to go back down almost like memory lane, kind of putting the presentation together and thinking about how things went and what we did and how we did it. And Dean Williams, obviously, I know I talked with you. I guess I'll always call you Dean Williams because that's what I referred to you as. But
it's okay. I can answer to a number of different things. That'll work.
Okay. I remember now, we spoke multiple times about this journey and how things were going to go. And so if there's any memories that you have as we go along this, please feel free to give your words as well.
Sure. Well, I just saw you as an entrepreneur. You ask really good questions. You had some nervousness along the way, which is understandable. You had a lot of questions, and you recall after class we'd chat or catch you in the hall or the clinic, and we chat a lot. So you've been able to take all that and move forward, and that's tremendous.
Yeah, it was crazy was a word I heard a lot when I started talking about doing this. So there was definitely some nervousness within it. But so our story, my wife and I started to plan this, and you'll hear me probably say we a lot, or our. And when I'm referring to we or our, I'm referring to myself and my wife because she's been in this journey with me since we were 16 years old. So she was a big part of all of this as well. Always been my support. So again, wouldn't have ever been able to do it without her. And she actually works in our office now as well. She's if you put the job titles to her, she'd probably have about 7 of them. But it's there's a kiddo sighting with William. But she draws blood for us when we do PRP. She does all of our payroll. She does all the managerial stuff. She's pretty much the do it all when we come to the office. So we started planning this thing second and third year dental school. And that was me back then with her in the chair. I don't remember exactly what the impressions were for, but I was a Clinic C kid. So any Clinic C kids in here? Yeah. And then that was my older boy in the picture with the CG hat on. I don't know, he was probably 18 months older in that chair. So I always knew early on I was going to be on the path to early ownership. I just wasn't quite sure how that ownership was going to happen. I had a grand vision of, I want to start a place from scratch. But there was always some nervousness about doing it, right? Because you're just going to go out and say, hey, I opened an office. Now people got to come to you. There was always some hesitant times thinking about that. Actually, I don't know if Dr. Barrick is still there or not. When I was there, he was in screening clinic a lot of the times, and he worked with at the time a practice transition group as well, which there was times where we thought maybe we should just buy a practice instead of starting from scratch, because then you already have patients. There's already an established office that you can work from. And it sounded great, but in the back of my mind, I always knew, I want something to be mine, something that we built, something that was our vision, right? And ultimately, we decided against it because when you get down to it, you've got the selling doc that wants to get as much out of the office as he can, rightfully so, because that's what he or she has built throughout their career. And are possibly using it as a retirement or, that final, here's my last little bit to my retirement so that I have money set aside so I can live while I retire. But then at most of the offices we looked at, the vision for us, we would have had to spend probably another $200,000 to $300,000 to update everything the way that we wanted it to be, right? So at the end of the day, it just never really made sense to us to buy an office and then completely work it over. At that point, I always, and my wife, when we talked about it, always felt like it was an over investment at the time, right? Because at the end of the day, we probably would have made it back, but why overpay for something when you're just gonna have to redo everything the minute you walk in? So ultimately, we decided to open a scratch practice. I knew from the start that when we opened the office, I wanted it to be, you know, a state-of-the-art, technology-driven practice. And part of that was, as a third year, I attended Dentsply Sirona, one of the leading dental manufacturing companies, used to put on these regional, they called them symposium events. They don't do them so much anymore, but partly because of COVID and everything else, but they started to kind of lose popularity over time. But it was a big, I don't want to call it like a, it was essentially a sales event, but it was more of a demonstration event where you would go to these events and they would show you exactly how technology or how their products could work in your practice. And when I went to one of these things, a couple of the presenters just really drove the idea of technology in a practice home with me, and it just made sense. My wife has a nursing, or she is a nurse, so her background has always been patient safety. And so for what we wanted to do in the office, it was a, you know what, this is going to make sure that we do things safely. This is going to make sure that we 100% know where things are going, how things are going, and that we can 100% diagnose, you know, this is what's going on. And when I'm referring to that, it's mostly the 3D cone beam technology that we invested in. So a little bit more, our story continued. You know, I applied for the business loan as soon as I received my license, but the one thing that I didn't think about was that they were going to wonder if I could do clinical dentistry, right? I come out as a brand new dentist and go, hey, I can do all this, so let's get going. And the bank goes, you're crazy. We don't even know if you could fill a tooth, right? They want to know how are you going to pay the loan back, right? So if you can't do dentistry, you can't make any money, you can't pay the loan back. So they were a little hesitant. Well, not a little, they were very hesitant and actually denied our initial request. And so even though we had a fantastic business plan laid out, and the bank, even the guy that we were working with to do the loan, loved it. We had everything down to a T, you know, projections, people we're going to work with, how we were going to do it, everything laid out beautifully. But I just had no proof that I could actually clinically do dentistry, which at the time I'm thinking, well, how do I even do that? But obviously now being 8 years out and going through the experience, you can get production collection reports, which then show, you know, how much dentistry you've done in a certain amount of time. So obviously it was the one very important thing that I had overlooked in the entire plan. At that point, it was, oh, well, we put all our eggs in this basket. Where do we go from here? Now it was, now I've got to, you know, I'm 20 steps behind all my classmates who started securing all their associateships back in February, March, when they're getting ready to graduate in May, right? So now I'm kind of crumbs in the barrel trying to figure out where we could go. And what happened was I ended up working 6 months in an emergency clinic, as well as a pediatric office, right? So honestly, and some of you may agree with me, I don't know what, if we have any third or fourth year students on the group, but working with kids was the absolute last thing I ever thought I would do, right? You get pedo clinic, you get through clinic and you're like, no way will I ever do this. No, I can't do it. And I did it because that was the job that was there for me. It was, hey, I've got bills to pay, my loans are coming due, I've got a family to support, I don't have a choice, right? So I did that. I worked at the emergency clinic as well at the same time. And it was actually one of the best things that ever happened to help us grow our practice once we got open, right? Because the little things that I picked up along the way of how to handle emergencies and how to manage emergencies, and more so even how to manage kids. It was more so with the pediatric office. You know, when you figure out how to treat a kid and how to treat we'll call it a 6-year-old child who has no idea you gave them an injection and has no idea what you did, and they laugh and joke and watch TV through the whole procedure, guess what? Little Timmy's mom is going to go tell all of her, Facebook group friends of, oh my God, Dr. Lewis was so awesome today. Little Timmy didn't even know he gave him the shot. He did all the work on him, and little Timmy has no idea what even happened to him. And then guess what? All of little Timmy's mom's friends in that Facebook group are going to start calling Dr. Lewis's office going, hey, you worked on little Timmy. I heard it was great. My kid hates the dentist too. Maybe you could change that, right? And it is the one thing that will help you drive and build your practice like no other, or at least in my mind, right? Obviously, I'm biased because I know that's how it happened for us. But any questions so far? Anything coming up?
Yeah, we have one from William. He said, do you know if we can get production reports from the school?
To the best of my knowledge, when I was there, I think we were using Axiom. I don't know if you're still using that, but you can. There is a report, because obviously after the fact, I found out there is a report button that you can go in and print a report for all the dentistry that you have done over whatever time period. So there is a report that is there. In hindsight, that's what I did, because that's when it was like, oh man, I wish I would have done that. But I don't know if the bank would have even accepted it, is my bigger thing. Because, it shows you did, $50,000 of dentistry over 2 years. Right. And it's not because you're not hustling and not doing everything you're supposed to be doing, but just because you have 3-hour appointment blocks where you see one patient in that 3 hours, right? Like, for instance, in our office right now, in a 3-hour block, we would probably see 25 patients, right? Because we have on a normal day, we run probably 10 columns. And an hour an appointment, right? That's 30 patients. So when you get out in I'll call it real world clinical dentistry, where you're seeing, multiple patients and multiple chairs, that production collection report definitely ticks up real fast compared to what you did through dental school.
Dr. Frazee, let me just hop in here. I put in the chat. This is a question we can certainly take up with Dr. Weingarten, but the challenge, and I've shared this with the students too. The banker is your friend to the point that he or she feels good that you can pay back the loan, and that's what you're alluding to here in terms of your productivity, your production numbers and whatnot. Dental school is an abstraction from reality. It's a training program. It's not the real world, and you've certainly been hitting on that quite clearly. So that's the nervousness of the banking business. They typically want to see 1 or 2 years where you could show a production report that what you produced and what was collected and things like that.
Right. Anything else anybody could think of before I move on?
So Dr. Frazee, with that point being said, would that pretty much say that owning or starting a practice right after graduation is probably not feasible for at least 1 to 2 years without that production report?
I would say starting a scratch practice from absolutely nothing is going to be, unless you have some inherited money that you can put a large sum down, is going to be very, very, very difficult. I never say impossible. I never say it's not going to be that you can't do it, right? Because there's always a way to do something. The downside is right now, after 2009, 2010, banks are so incredibly tight with their money right now. Like right now, we're trying to go through a refinance thing for our practice, and it has taken almost 5 months. And not because of, it's all the banking regulation stuff where they say, well, we need this and we need that. And then I get the papers to them, and then something changes, and then I have to get them more papers. And it's not impossible, but it's improbable. How's that? And as far as ownership, I mean, buying into a practice is definitely different than starting a scratch practice, right? If you buy into a practice, say you buy into a practice that annually is doing, say, $500,000 a year, they're going to assume when you move in and take over the office that you're going to lose some of the patients off the bat. Probably 30% is what they're going to estimate, right? But then that still gives you an already present cash flow, right? Which is what they're going to look for. They want to make sure that you're going to cash flow and that you're going to be able to pay your loans and pay their loan and make sure you survive, right? So when you start from scratch, you've got zero. You've got to take out working capital from the bank, which is extra money they're giving you, right? You don't have any cash flow coming in. You literally have 0 patients and you have $0 in an account, except for what the bank just gave you, right? So in a scratch situation, it's a risky gamble for the bank because they don't know where it's going to go, right? You could you could be the greatest person in the world, but not be able to do a single lick of dentistry, right? And for them, they don't know that unless you can provide them evidence of that. In a situation where you're going to buy an office that has cash flow, you may be able to own it sooner, for sure.
And what are we talking to start a state of the art, brand new as a general dentist? What are we talking? Are we asking for $1 million? Are we asking for 750,000?
How about we'll get there?
Okay.
I'll tell you what I spent. How's that? But it comes. I don't know, maybe a couple slides.
Dr. Frazee, there's another question as well. Do you know anything about how a bank might view a 1-year GPR instead of an associateship?
I do not. I have 0 experience with that. I went straight from school into what I was going to do. So my guess is that they're going to view a GPR as if it's still an educational setting, like Dean Williams was discussing. It's still an educational setting where, yeah, it's going to be a little bit faster pace. It's going to be more advanced maybe than what the traditional dental school setting is, but I have a feeling they're still going to consider it that you're in an educational setting.
I would agree with that. It would also, and Sarah, I think, asked the question, would help with your production because you'll typically ramp on up to being seen 6 or 8 patients a day, and you could show that kind of production report and then make an argument. But Dr. Frazee is right on target. I mean, in terms of a cold start, you just don't have any track record, and banks are looking for cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah, the bank wants to know that you're going to be able to pay them back, right? The bank's not going to lend you money knowing that you're not going to pay them back. They're not in the business to give money out, right? They're in the business to make their money back with the interest rate that they're going to charge you on the loan, right? So if they go into it knowing, well, you're not going to pay me back, they're not going to do it. Or you're not going to be able to pay me back. I guess preface it that way, right? It's going to go through underwriting multiple times as you try to get through it. I think ours went through underwriting 3 times before it finally was approved. And they're going to tell you, the way this works, it doesn't make sense. The percentages doesn't make sense, or the way this is, it will work, and here's your money is what it ultimately boils down to.
Dr. Frazee, I have a question too. Did you pursue any other alternative financing options like SBA loans or private equity or anything along those lines, or did you go straight to the bank?
So at the time we discussed the SBA route. The downside with the SBA route is, I think at the time, majority of them wanted 20 to 30% down. And I think it's still somewhere 10 to 20% down, right? And when you're talking scratch practice, you want to, state of the art, all this other stuff. I didn't have $80,000 to $100,000 to put down on an SBA loan. That's the downside of those traditional lending type of things. For me, when you go out and you've got the Bank of Americas, you've got Wells Fargo, those are the 2 that I know of off the bat that have a direct dental practice division, essentially, where when you go to them, they know the dental side of things and they know how it's going to work, and they will give you the money with 0% down as long as calculations and things work out for them. And so that was the route that I ended up going, was through Bank of America. I think their division is like Practice Solutions or something like that, which you can look up because it's still that way. But they were incredibly helpful with getting everything set up and making sure that, taking the steps to make sure that we weren't going to fail. Because even once we got the loan through them, I had to do 2 years worth of essentially reporting every month, where I gave them our new patient numbers, our monthly revenue, all these statistics that they track to make sure that your business is going to succeed. Right. And then if they start to see that those numbers are dwindling or something's happening, they're going to come in and say, hey, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Can you explain this? Luckily, we never had to do that, but side story. I remember one month we had opened in July, and it was September, which now we every year jokingly call it Sucktember, because production and collection is always down in September for some reason in our office. And we don't know if it's because of going back to school or what it is, but the whole month of September, we did okay in July, we did okay August, and then September tanked. And we collected less money in the month of September of 2013 than we do on a Friday now. Right. And so as a new practice owner, and I've got a family, let's say at that time, my youngest would have been about 10 months old, and a 3-year-old at home, and 2 additional team members who now their family is relying on us to provide for them too. It was not a good moment. And luckily things turned around and we never looked back from there. But it's those times where, it's either, man, what's going on? I'm done, I'm toast, or you put your nose to the ground and you keep running forward. So we ran forward as hard as we could, and it took us to great places.
There's another question from William. If one wants to buy/start up a practice as soon as possible, is it better to build up liquidity opposed to paying down the student debt?
What's your student debt interest rate right now?
So I think everyone right now, we're almost at like 7. I think we're about 7%, but it's painful. But they do an income calculated repayment. So
I did that my first 2 years, actually, income-based repayment. And so that was how we kind of worked around a few things too as we started our office. My honest answer is that if you have cash saved up, it's going to make it easier for you to do what you want to do, right? Okay. Money talks, right? If you go to the bank and say, hey, I've got $100,000 in an account, I'm ready to put down on this, the bank's gonna go, oh, that's great. We can lend you, $300,000 and call it a day, right? It will, my opinion is it'll make it a lot easier. And through my experience, it'll make it a lot easier if you have cash reserves.
Yeah. Got it. Thanks for answering that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, anything else? I'll keep moving along and all the questions can keep coming. All right. All right. So after that, we went and worked the associateships, and I actually, Dean Williams touched on it, that they typically want, a year or 2. I was told that I had to wait 12 months. I didn't like that answer. So I essentially worked my tail off for 6 months, working like 6 days a week, pretty much, between the 2 clinics, and presented them. Before I reapplied, I presented it to the banker that I was working with and said, hey, here is my production and collection report. And I think at the time, in 6 months between the 2 offices, it was like somewhere around $600,000-$700,000 between the 2. And I said, is this going to be good enough to reapply? I said, I know you wanted me to wait for a year, but what do you think? And he was like, no way, dude, let's go ahead and you can reapply now. Now I say that the emergency clinic was a 12-hour day, 3 days a week, right? So that was a lot of dentistry, those 3 days, right? And it was, I look back at it and go, oh, why did I do that? But I did what I had to do in order to get where I'm at, right? And that's what I always think about. I worked my tail off at that point to kind of enjoy some things now. So But so we reapplied January of 2013. So I got my license in June of 2012, reapplied January of 2013. The loan was approved. Somebody asked the question earlier, you know, how much are you going to spend for an office, right? If you're going to buy an office that already has cash flow and you're going to have, you know, state-of-the-art cone beam and CEREC machine and laser and all this other stuff, I mean, you're not going to be below probably $1 million, right? If you find a diamond in the rough, you might get, you know, 750 maybe, right? But it's going to be a lot larger chunk, right? For me, it was 420K was our hard number, and we had to make it work within that. So we did some things to try to figure that out. Luckily for us, we had already found a space when we had provided our business plan of, hey, this is where we're going to go. This is going to be a great location. I'd already ran all the metrics on that location as far as dentist to population ratio, income, you know, population, things like that. All our due diligence was completely done on this location. And luckily, you know, 6 months later, that space was still available. Had it not been available, it might have been a completely different story. So luckily that worked out for us. We opened our doors then in July of 2013. So luckily for us, we'd already had everything planned, ready, in place. The loan was approved quickly. I think like February, everything was approved. We started construction in March. Construction moved quickly. We got everything done. And July 15th of 2013 was our first day open. When we opened, the biggest thing for me was after going to that symposium, I had to have that cone beam machine. It was just one of those items, like, you know, you get stuck on this and you go, I gotta have it. This was that one item that I just had to have. And so we figured out a way in order to get the cone beam. And actually the way it worked out was I bought a floor model, right? So a little tip for all you guys as you move through. When you work with reps, they're going to try to sell you all the new stuff, obviously, because it's, you know, marked up, and that's their goal, is to sell stuff. What I need all of you to do is ask, hey, do you have a floor model available? Because sometimes they will have a floor model and you may save $40,000 on a large piece of equipment. Okay, so make sure, and it's not that it's going to be, you know, this still came with the warranty, this still came with everything else with it. It's just to use it at the branch as a demonstration. Funny story on our end, when the techs were installing it, they noticed that something was messed up on it. Well, and come to find out, when they took it down out of the branch in Baltimore, they dropped it. So I ended up getting a brand new machine for the cost of the floor model. But luckily for us, we had great techs that were installing everything and noticed it. And you know, it took them 2 hours to come and tell me because I kept waiting to go play with it, and they were just kind of hauling around and not getting it installed. And finally they told me that it was broken, and that they had already been on the phone with the rep to make sure they could get a new one there before we opened, and had taken care of everything before they told me. But so it was, you know, that's one of those things where you could save some money in a couple places. You know, ask for floor models, ask for demo models, ask for things like that. It never hurts. And always, you know, if they're going to sell you a demo model, ask, does it have the warranty with it? Because warranties are huge for me on some of these, you know, a cone beam machine that's $100,000, or like the CEREC machine that we also bought later, you know, $7,500 just for the acquisition unit, you know, and then you get the milling unit, you're looking, you know, $150,000 for the system. That warranty starts to really kick in when a part to replace is like $5,000. So just make sure that's something too, a little piece of advice, or what do you call it? A clinical pearl, I think somebody said. It's not so much clinical, it's more so business pearl, but just make sure you always think about stuff like that. Opening with the cone beam unit was one of the smartest decisions I made through the entire process. And that is because, you know, for us, it was a game changer. I don't know how many times in the first 6 months we had a person come in and go, I've been to another office and I've got something right here that it hurts and I can't figure out what it is. And the other office couldn't figure out what it is, and they tried to send me to this office and send me to that office. And so, you know, the first thing I would do was, okay, let's take a cone beam, right? And so the way I describe it to people, for me, is you take a PA and you take a box, right? You got a box and you just squash it together into a flat plane. Right now, everything that's in all three of those dimensions in that box gets smashed together. And everything that is in here or over here all gets lost within that one flat plane that you may or may not see. Right? When you take that 3D image, you pull that back out, and now you can scroll through and look at everything. And some of the stuff that we were able to immediately pinpoint and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, this is what's going on. It built our practice at a incredible rate, right? Because when Mrs. Jones comes in and she's been in pain for 4 months or 3 months or whatever, and she's just been being passed around and nobody could figure it out. And the minute you take this and you see this huge lesion on tooth 4 and go, oh, Mrs. Jones, we can do a root canal and you'll be fine. All the pain will go away. Mrs. Jones loves you for the rest of her life. And she sends all of her family to you, and she sends all of her friends to you, which then allows your practice to explode. And that for me, you know, it was a game changer. To be the confidence to be able to say the difference between Mrs. Jones, this might be what's going on, versus Mrs. Jones, this is what's going on. And you literally show them on a computer screen in front of them that Mrs. Jones, this is the spot that's causing all that pain. It's a complete game changer in treatment acceptance too, which is a total different presentation. But let's see. So are questions popping up or?
Yeah, we just got a question.
Okay.
So he said, what's a reasonable operating cost to estimate for a general dental practice? And how do you calculate practice capacity, operating capacity, hygiene chairs versus emergency versus dental chairs?
All right, let's break that question down. What was the first part?
It was, what's a reasonable operating cost to estimate for a general dental practice?
So if you go off of statistics and everybody else, they're going to break it down to a like per chair per hour type of ratio, right? So typically what you tend to find is like $200 to $400 per chair per hour, right? So essentially, if you have a 4-chair office, right? And typically that's restorative chairs. So you say you have 3 restorative chairs, right? And call it $200 per chair per hour, right? So 3 chairs times $200 is what, $600 per hour. Or I'm sorry, that's not operating cost, that's production. I totally took the wrong way. Operating cost is probably going to be something similar, but I don't have a number for that, really. Right, the goal for most people is to say, I want to produce $200 to $300 an hour per chair, right? So, you know, when you get to the point of capacity, the decision to add a chair, I think, was part of that question too.
Yeah, it's how do you calculate practice capacity, operating capacity, and like between the chairs, the different chairs?
Man, that is a loaded question. Like that's a whole presentation in itself too.
Sorry, Dr. Fraser. I was kind of jumping down. My bad. I guess essentially is like you put a business model together. You go to the bank and you're like, okay, this is how much money I need. You got $420,000.
Yeah.
How much of that are you projecting to have? You know, for operating cost. You know, you got to hire your front desk.
I got you. Okay. All right. So that helps a little bit now. So like for me, I think we took out something like $30,000 in working capital. And so essentially what that was a sum of money that they deposited in an account for us that said, here's what you have until you get your cash flow rolling, right? I didn't really ever sit down and think about from I need to add all this stuff up and figure it out. I just kind of figured, I've got 2 employees and I've got 3 chairs. We need a little bit of money to get going so that we could really rock and roll this thing. I'm sure there's somewhere there is a calculation that you could figure out and do, or that somebody has of, it costs this much per hour to run. And I have it somewhere in an Excel sheet where it costs what it costs our office to run. But our office is a totally different beast than a lot of different offices. I don't think I answered that question at all either. So if you want to talk about it later, you can email me too, William. I have no problem with that.
Thanks, Dr. Fraser. Okay.
Yeah. All right, anything else? No, okay. All right, so from January, so remember we opened in July of 2013, but the one thing from January of 2013 to August of 2013, I took almost 120 hours of continuing education. I don't know how many of you even have thought about continuing education at this point. I know right now you're worried about STI exams and things like that. So obviously that's the important things right now that you need to worry about. But CE, you get out in the real world, and of course, to maintain your license, you have to keep, I believe it's 20 hours of CE every 2 years. And so, in 6 months, I took 6 years worth of CE essentially. But for me, it was, I want to make sure that I know what I don't know from dental school, right? So the goal was for us to be able to provide all aspects of clinical dentistry in one location, right? What I've found even further is that if you can do it well, right, and you can maintain within standard of care, that if you offer as many aspects of clinical dentistry in your office, Mrs. Jones doesn't want to go to 6 different offices to get one thing done, right? If you say, Mrs. Jones, we can do that implant and we can do it in 2 visits within 4 months. And Mrs. Jones, I'll be the one that does it for you because, remember Mrs. Jones from back when you said, hey, there's that lesion that's causing you all that pain. Well, 8 years later, she's still a patient. Now she needs an implant, right? You tell Mrs. Jones you can do it in 2 visits in 4 months, she's on board with it. When you tell Mrs. Jones, oh, Mrs. Jones, I got to refer you here to do this and refer you there to do that, Mrs. Jones likely may not go get it done, right? But she trusts you as your provider, and if you were to do it, she would be more likely to do it. That's just what I've found through, the 8 years worth of practice that I've been in. So I budgeted into our original practice loan. Remember that $420,000? I think we budgeted somewhere around $20,000 of CE money because I knew that's what we wanted to do. I knew I wanted to get, for me, and I think it's somewhere later in the presentation, I always say dental school taught me what I didn't know about dentistry, right? And it sounds odd saying it out loud, but I came out knowing how to drill a DO on 4. I came out knowing how to prep a crown. I didn't really come out confident knowing how to drill into somebody's jawbone and put a screw in it, right? But it was something that I knew I wanted to do. So I knew I had to put forth the effort to go make sure I mastered that part of it, right? So that was part of the CE. The other thing, sedation, you'll find out if you're not already finding out, everybody hates the dentist. Everybody's scared of the dentist, right? If you can offer even conscious sedation in your office, it will increase treatment acceptance as well. So that was another part that we went and spent some extra CE money on. Looking back, I can't remember what else we spent it on, but we also did some of the construction ourselves. Remember, I talked about that $420,000 budget. Well, we had to figure out some way to stay within that budget because some of the stuff that we wanted, it was going to be difficult to maintain that budget. But my wife and I actually spent our 6th wedding anniversary in Tyvek suits, sitting on the tailgate of my truck, and we split a large onion ring from Steak and Shake and a halfway melted Kit Kat bar that was in the on the dashboard of my truck for dinner, right? And I still hear about it every anniversary. So anybody out there, make sure you take your anniversary off at least. It's because I'm going to hear about that for the rest of my life, I'm sure. It was, for us, it was, and we've always been that way through everything, is, all right, we've got our limit, we've got our budget. What can we do to make sure that we maintain within that budget, right? And so that was part of it. We painted, we did trim, we did flooring, we did things like that to make sure, flooring was a big ticket item where, to have somebody do it, it was $15,000, $20,000, but we found the floor for like $4,000. And luckily I've always been pretty handy. I actually worked construction growing up, so it wasn't a huge issue for me, but it was those little things where if you can find ways to save money throughout the process, when you got to do it, you got to do what you got to do at that point. And that was the mindset that we had during that time. I don't know that I would go back and work on our anniversary again, but yeah, that's history at this point. So where are we now? Obviously, you know, we went through all that. We got, it's been a journey, right? It's been 8 years, almost 8 years now. July will be 8 years of just continual growth. And one of those things that I planned when we made our business plan was to be as successful as we are, but I didn't plan for it to happen so soon, which also is a difficult problem to manage. I know I try not to complain about it too much, you know, because it's a great problem to have, but at the same time, it is very difficult to manage rapid growth, right? I think the question earlier was, well, how do you determine when you add a chair? Or how do you determine X, Y, Z? You know, my goal as we were determining it was, holy cow, we've got so many patients, we can't fit them in these chairs. Okay, it's time to add another one, right? You can put a number on it. You could say, you know, once we get booked out 4 weeks, we add a chair, or, you know, once we get booked out 6 weeks, we add a chair. You know, at some point it becomes, you know, what do I feel is best? You know, how far do you want to be booked out? How far do our patients accept us being booked out, right? Because there comes a time where if you tell a patient, I'm sorry, Mrs. Jones, you got to wait 8 weeks to have that filling done, Mrs. Jones is going to start looking somewhere else to have it done possibly, right? So there comes a point in time where you go, okay, I'm comfortable enough. We've got cash flow enough. Let's add this room, because now you add a room, it becomes more productive, right? So where are we now? And I'm not doing, none of this is like a chest beating moment. This is just, you know, real world numbers for what we've done. And I hate sometimes presenting this stuff because sometimes people get that way, but this is what we've done and how we've done it, right? So we have grown from 0 patients in July of 2013 to over 12,000 patients in our database. When I ran the report, 7,000 of those were reported as active. And I think our charting system classifies an active patient as seeing them within the last 24 months. So we've been averaging about 90 to 100 new patients per month for the last 5 years, right? So a lot of people will ask, you know, what are your new patient numbers? What are your new patient numbers? Because it is a huge metric for determining possibly how much your practice will grow or how well your practice is going to do. Because, you know, getting new patients in means new dentistry to do, right? If you just kept seeing the same 15 patients all the time, eventually there's no dentistry left to do, and they're just going to be recall, recall, recall. And that's, while it's great, it's not profitable usually, right? So we've grown from 3 rooms and 2 employees, which, and what I don't say in this is we've grown from me doing all of our own hygiene, or all of my own hygiene, to 3 rooms, 2 employees, me doing all hygiene, to a brand new standalone building with 12 treatment rooms and a conference center upstairs that at some point I hope to start offering some CE classes out of. But that was completed in March of 2020, which was absolute terrible timing with everything that happened. But it was done. We moved in. That's the new building. Cam, I think you've been a couple times now, right? Yeah, okay. I don't have any pictures of the inside. I wish I did. It's absolutely gorgeous inside, but we literally moved. If you were to remove the building and look across the street, we were in the building essentially right behind this building. So it wasn't very far removed for us, but it's been a great move. You know, being able to expand treatment rooms and being able to provide more dentistry and get more patients in a timely manner has been nice. So the new building, actually, of the 12 rooms, 2 of the rooms are dedicated surgery rooms. In our office, we do a ton of surgery, a ton of implant stuff. So we decided to make 2 of the rooms dedicated just for surgery, kind of individual rooms with doors on it, so that way you could close the door if you needed, like that. Also, one thing that's been a different business model for me that I didn't touch on too much is we actually have a full service dental lab that we started as well that has or will have 2 full-time technicians as of next week. So we are, you know, we're milling all of our own zirconia restorations out of that lab. We do most of our CEREC stuff, so we use Emacs and other materials in CEREC. if we're going to do zirconia restorations, we usually go through the lab to do that. But we process our own dentures. We set our own dentures. We have a lab tech that literally runs a column that does like denture try-ins and things like that, which is incredibly helpful for her to be there. She's literally in the room with the patient when they're trying it in, and the patient's going, hey, I don't like where this is. And she literally moves it and they go, oh, I love it, right? And then it's ready for process. The grand scheme of things, it's saving appointments, which means it's saving you chair time and it's saving the patient time, right? The patient doesn't want to come back 14 times to do 14 different try-ins, because then they've got to take 14 half days off of work. Even though it's a 30-minute appointment for you, Miss Jones has to take half a day off of work, make it to that 30-minute appointment, right? So that's something to always keep in mind too. And we grew from 2 employees to, I think we have 17 team members now. I laugh, I joke with the girls sometimes. I don't remember everybody's name anymore because there's so many people there. But the good thing is everybody has each other's back, and that's, you know, growing and cultivating a good team is also a huge aspect of what you'll do as an office leader and as a business leader, right? So number wise, you know, we grew from $0 essentially to where when I was by myself, we were doing about $1.9 million a year in 2018, right? So we were hustling, okay? And that wasn't, I mean, that was go, go, go. Dr. Haug, who I don't know if any of you know yet, I don't know how the class schedule is, but Dr. Haug actually came to us, side story again, funny side story. So let's see, November, so we opened in July of 13. In June-ish, July-ish of 2014, he calls me out of the blue. And the first thing that I think is, what did I screw up so badly in school that Dr. Haug is calling me? And it turns out the situation that he was in just wasn't working for him. And he was like, hey, do you want to go have dinner? That was even worse, because then I started thinking, great, it's so bad I got to sit down over dinner and he's got to tell me about it. So we went to dinner and sat down, and he just essentially asked, he said, hey, I know things are going well. He goes, what do you think about me coming to your office a couple of days a week? And I was like speechless at the time, because that was the furthest thing from my mind that I even thought was going to happen. But so in November of 2014, he's now been there almost 7 years now, where he works Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, seeing his referrals from CENTA, so Center for Ear, Nose, Throat, and Allergies, where they've either they've done surgeries or things like that, where they've removed cancers, and then he makes obturators or ears or noses or things like that. You know, I don't know that he really talks about much of that in your guys' class. So the first time that somebody walked in and took their ear off and handed it to the assistant was a little weird. She kind of freaked out, but it's kind of neat to see what he does every day. Then we added Dr. Cummings, who was a classmate of mine. Odd journey for him. I was trying to get him to join us on this meeting too, but he had something going on tonight where he couldn't join us. His journey took him out to New York for a while, and then back in 2019, I had been looking for an associate for almost 18 months, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get a Facebook message from him that says, hey man, I hear you're looking for a doc. And it was like, yeah. He's like, well, I'll be moving back. Why don't we meet up and talk about it? And he came out and spent like a day in the office with everybody. And the day after, he goes, hey man, I think we can make this work. And so he's been there now, coming up on 2 years here in a couple of days. And so after he joined us, we finished 2019 with at 2.5 million in revenue. So even once he joined us, we grew even more. 2020, and they both say hi, by the way, Dr. Haug and Dr. Cummings. So 2020 was off to a great start, but everybody knows what happened in 2020. So COVID actually shut us completely down for 8 weeks. We could see emergencies and things like that, but you know, seeing 4 patients a day in a brand new building sure wasn't going to cover much. So it was tough to sit and stare at a brand new building, not being able to use it. But you know, the 8 weeks killed us, and then we also completely, you know, just like they did at the dental school, I'm sure, revamped our scheduling protocols and our PPE protocols, and we spent a fortune on PPE in 2020, and we still are. I don't know, I don't know how much of that stuff you guys get, but like a box of gloves for us is like $25 now. So it's still astronomical, some of the stuff, how much it costs. But, some of the stuff you don't think about right now, you go through 47 gloves to do one exam, when you start using 4 gloves in one visit, you go, oh my gosh, wait a minute, that was $2. So as a business owner, you start to think about stuff like that. So the big question, Cam, any questions, anything else?
Yeah, we had a question. What have been your successful marketing strategies to grow from that 0 to 12,000 patients?
Yeah, so when we first opened, everybody told me, don't do postcards, it's a waste of money. And we actually spent about $4,000 a month doing 10,000, I think it was 10,000 or 20,000 postcards, right? That get mailed out. And essentially the way we tried to market that was, hey, we're a new office. Here's what we offer. Here's what's going on, to really intrigue people. Here's some change. Come check us out. So that was one thing that we did. The other thing for me, it was word of mouth, and the cone beam was a huge part of that. So for us, what we did was we have computer screens in front of the chairs, right? So if there's an image, I can pull the image up in front of the patient, and then I can walk the patient through it. And I don't know how many people, when we went through their 3D scan with them, went, man, doc, this is like Star Trek, or this is crazy stuff. This is so cool. And then, you print them. What we would do is you could print them a disc with that information on it, so they could take it home and show, their husband or their wife or whoever, hey, look at this cool thing. But that helped us grow too. But really, the biggest thing for us was word of mouth. I touched on it earlier. Mrs. Jones brought little Timmy in, and we treated little Timmy, absolutely awesome, right? When you've got a kid laughing through a procedure that's not on nitrous, just because he's having fun at the dentist. We have kids now that come in that their parents say, I don't know what you do here, but the kids are asking to come back to the dentist, right? When you create an atmosphere like that, especially for kids as a new dentist, that word spreads like wildfire. Right. And then you're treating the adults the same way, right? You treat the golden rule. You treat people the way you want to be treated, and everything else will follow. Right. That has always been my thinking about it the whole time is, I'm going to do what I would do for my sister or my dad or my grandma or my son, whatever, and you treat it that way, and everything else just kind of follows suit. So word of mouth. And for us, we're in Mooresville, so it's, we'll call it small town. Right, it spreads quickly, right? So between those 3 things, and now we do some, direct marketing. So pay-per-click type stuff, where everybody gets like, oh man, I said something about a weight bench, and now in my Facebook feed there's a weight bench ad, right? So we do some of that stuff where if you say implant, our implant ad may pop up in your news feed, or if you're searching Google for implants, or same-day crown, or something like that, our ad may pop up, and then when you click on it, we have to pay so much per click, things like that. So that stuff's out there. That's mainly a lot of what we do these days is some direct targeted stuff, but word of mouth, and that is really all we're doing right now.
And then there's another question for you. So how's the staffing? Like, have you experienced a lot of staff?
Right now or in general?
Probably over the years, I would assume.
Okay. Yeah. So over the years, my goal, and I touch on a little bit more later, is you create a team, right? And your team is who you rely on. And so for me, before COVID, we had only had 2 team members turnover in 7.5 years or 7 years, right? And then COVID hit, and I called it our COVID shuffle. In that time period, we lost three team members. So, I went from shuffling 2 team members in 7 years to shuffling 3 team members, and now adding additional team members to try to cover for what we had been closed, right? So you hear all these staffing nightmares, and for me, I try to not use the term staff. Staff is an infection, team is who you work with, right? It's the team for me that has been great until this last year, and it's been really, really difficult, right? And so now we're still trying to, it used to be where I would put an ad out and say, hey, I need a sub hygienist for Friday. And within 2 hours, I'd have 5 people commenting saying, hey, I can do it. Hey, I can do it. I put an ad out 2 weeks ago and I've had 0 interest in it. So COVID has really changed some stuff when it comes to that. Luckily for us, since May, so our I'll call it our COVID shuffle. That's what I always call it with our team. Since May, things have been pretty solid, but it's been very difficult trying to find people to work.
All right, we got a couple more questions for you. So the first one is, what advice would you give yourself/dental student to be better ready for ownership?
Give me about 3 slides.
And then, yeah, do you want me to just hold off on the other one?
Is it related to that?
It's about just hiring a business manager and if it's worth it, or is it smarter and easier just to rely on yourself to do it?
So that's a tricky one for me, because luckily for me, my business manager is my wife, right? So my wife worked at Methodist Hospital until 2017, at which point we got to the point where we were so busy and I was so overwhelmed trying to do everything that I went, look, either I need to hire a business manager or office manager, or I need you to come help. And our direct words to each other, or her direct words to me, were that nobody is going to manage our money better than I would, or better than we would, right? So it is very nice to have somebody else to manage that side of things. The flip side of that is you have to trust that person with everything that you have, right? Because ultimately that person could be shuffling, $1,000 cash here or there under the table that you never noticed, that you just don't handle, right? That unless you're paying very, very close attention to it, you hear it all the time. I mean, maybe not all the time, but you hear of it, embezzlement from offices, right? 300,000 here, a couple 100,000 here, and it happens. It's just somebody that the managerial, which I touch on a little bit too, the managerial stuff can eat you alive, right? The first 2 years when I was doing, everything by myself, I would work at the office for 8-9 hours a day. And then I would come home and work another 2 hours at home, trying to catch up on everything and finish this, finish that, finish payroll, make sure everything's in correctly, stuff like that. So in the grand scheme of things, in a shorter answer than my roundabout way, is yes, it's absolutely worth it. For us, it is very, very convenient that it just happens to be my wife. Okay. Are we good, Cam?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So is it worth it, right? People they value worth in different ways, right? Some people look at it, is it financially worth it? Is it worth it for, fulfillment? Is it worth it to do it? And my resounding answer is absolutely, right? You make your own schedule. You're the one that does it, right? So for me, it's a weird thing still, even after 8 years, for me to go in and go, hey, Julie is one of our front office team members. Hey, Julie, I need to take off 2 Fridays from now because I had something come up. Being able to go in and just have that ability to say, hey, I got to go. I can't do it. I don't know how that would work in a corporate setting, or I don't know how things like that would work. I got very, very jaded in the corporate setting when my wife was, she was 36 weeks pregnant. She was about 36 weeks pregnant and started going into labor while I was at work. And I went to the office manager at the time, and I said, hey, Lana, I got to go. My wife's in labor. And she goes, you can't leave until you find another doctor. And I had some very, very choice words that I shouldn't repeat in front of people. And I left, right? And of course, I still had a job after that because they needed dentists, but they probably could have fired me very easily, but I wasn't not going to leave while my wife's in labor, right? So in my setting right now, guess what? If my wife's in labor, hey, I'm going, guys, you got to call patients. And majority of patients, when you call them and say, hey, something happened with Dr. Frazee, they all are like, oh my gosh, I hope everything's okay, right? Because that's just the way you patients are, especially once you build that rapport with them, right? And not even from that, absolutely, is it worth it? Yes. Yeah, financially things will tick too, because then at the end of the day, it's yours, right? You put all that blood, sweat, and tears in it. Well, now look what it's worth financially 25 years later when you get ready to sell it and when you get ready to retire. Everything at the end of the day will pay off in any way you can think that it will, right? At the end of the day, it becomes the success of your vision, right? And it's your vision. It's not this doctor's vision. It's not this guy's directing me to do this. It's not XYZ, right? It's the vision that you created, and it's the vision that you built a plan around, and it's a vision that you executed, right? Plan the work and work the plan. And I say that all the time to people. If you plan it out and you work that plan, that then becomes your vision of exactly what you want, right? And work it so it becomes your vision, okay? But you have to have a vision to build it. And then you have to have that drive to keep it going, right? If you can't put those two things together, then practice ownership may not be for you. If you're like, man, I don't want to put extra hours in after I go home. I don't want to worry about, what's going on with Betty, who is arguing with Julie over something, right? As a practice owner, guess what? You got to worry and think about, well, what happened today that they're not happy with each other, right? In an associate setting or in a corporate setting, you don't have to worry about that. There's a different manager to worry about that, right? So if you don't have the drive and a vision to build what you want, then maybe practice ownership isn't worth it for you. But in my mind, for most people, it will be. The flip side of that is, like I just touched on, you are responsible for everything, right? Your name is the one that goes on the door, or your title of the office is what it is, right? So when something comes down, guess what? It's going to come down to you, right? It's not that, because Julie did this wrong. Well, it's not on Julie. Ultimately, you can reprimand Julie for doing it, right? But ultimately, that's your name on it, and that's you, right? So there's a lot of stuff that rolls around that you become responsible for that some days I wish I wasn't responsible for, right? But overall, the majority of days, I am always, always, always glad I did what I did. The craziest part of me, or the craziest part of all of it for me, was realizing that I'm now responsible for other families' financial success, right? It wasn't one of those things that I thought about as we created it. I was like, yeah, we'll have employees, we'll have team members. And then one day we sat down and we talked about it. And I think it was at the point when we had like 8 or 9 team members. And my wife and I, one day it just like clicked. We're like, man, you know what? If something happens with this, all those team members now lose a job and have to go back out into try to find another job. And it was that moment where it was like, holy crap, what do we do? Again, all worth it in the end. It's just one of those crazy things. And, like I've already touched on, every managerial aspect of the practice ultimately becomes your responsibility. There's no way around it, right? Yes, you can hire people to do it. Yes, there's business managing groups, right? So it's still your office, but you can hire a managing group to do it, right? But the downside is the managing group then tries to have you run things the way they want you to run it instead of the way you want to run it, right? So there's always trade-offs with things like that. It does take a lot off of your plate because now you're not worrying about near as much, but then you now lose some of that control, some of that autonomy that you had with that practice to make it run the way you wanted it to run. And some weeks management takes more time than clinical care, right? It's just the breaks of the game. Sometimes, I've actually tried to take some Thursdays away where I just literally sit in my office and do management stuff, because right now we're at a point where we're still trying to catch up from COVID stuff, that our front office team just gets hounded with phone calls every day. They're trying to catch up, and it's very, very difficult right now. So I've tried to block out some Thursdays where I can help with some more managerial type stuff to help everything get caught up. And it's just, one thing is I've now learned, you know what, I don't take it home. I need to set hours at the office to do the management stuff, right? Because what I've been doing is I work at the office and then I come home and I do management stuff. Well, it's not fair to my kids, it's not fair to my wife, not fair to our family time. So I've tried to get better about that. I don't know that my wife would agree that I have, but I've tried. So words of advice. I know somebody touched on this before, right? So I've got 3 kind of words of advice that I would kind of go back and tell myself, right? If I were in your shoes, right? And anything you're going to do, right? Whether it's associateship, whether it's ownership, whether it's whatever, right? Build a team to help you get there, right? This was the biggest thing that I did as a 2nd/3rd year student that I still rely on this team now to this day, right? And that team, if you try to do it alone, it's like you're going to fail, right? You're not going to know everything to do. It's just not, to know everything to get from point A to point B of owning a practice or buying into a practice or anything of that nature. It's not going to happen if you try to do it by yourself, right? Find an accountant, find an attorney, find a realty broker, find a dental team. I'm sure there's other people in this team that I didn't mention that you would probably benefit from having too. But these 4 people were absolutely influential in everything that we did throughout our process, right? And the dental team, for me, it was actually our Patterson reps, right? I distinctly remember meeting with a Patterson rep at the end of my 2nd year of dental school and just picking their brain and saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What can I expect? What route do I need to take? And I asked all these questions. Luckily for me, it was a willing rep that sat down with me and said, hey, here's what we do. Here's who I'll introduce you to. Here's, they started directing more team members into it. And I still work with these people. Some people are like, oh, Patterson's just there to sell you stuff. Well, not if you find the right rep, right? And we have a fantastic rep that we absolutely love. And if it's not Patterson, if it's Shine, if it's Benco, if it's whoever, just find somebody that is dental related to help you through some of the stuff, because it will be an absolute asset the team that you have. And then continue to work with your team throughout your career, right? We still work with the same accountant. We still have the same attorney. I still work with the same realty broker, right? And it's that team that allows us to continue to be successful. And the team in our office too. It's always, I rely heavily on team. Some of the members may change, but once you have the right team in place, everything it'll make it that much easier for everything. Okay. Second word of advice that I wish I'd have known when I was a dental student is to take advantage of student/new grad CE specials, right? Right now, you're not thinking about that at all. But when you get to 3rd and 4th year, it may be something that you start to think about. And it's one thing that I had absolutely no idea about that I wish I would have known about was that there is some student pricing for CE events, right? So, you go through your implant course and you go, hey, you know what? I learned enough, but I want to know more. Or you go through, oral surgery stuff and you go, you know what? I want to know more. There is special pricing for students and for grads within the 1st year. And a lot of times it can be up to 50% off, and so a typical CE is like $2,500 for a weekend, right? So if you go and spend $1,200, it's going to add up to quite a bit of savings, right? What I wish I'd have done was use my, extra money I took out to live to go to a CE course instead of a vacation. But hindsight's 2020. So looking back at my experience, dental school taught me what I didn't know about dentistry, right? And my dental school experience was great. It's not that it didn't teach me stuff. It taught me a whole lot of stuff, but it did teach me what I didn't know. right? I came out, I didn't know much about implants. I don't know how the curriculum is now. I think we had like 1.5 semester course on implants. I got enough oral surgery exposure, but I wish I'd had more. And you know, it taught me that I need to know more about these things or these procedures if I'm going to start providing them in the office. Okay, I knew enough that it wasn't enough to perform it at the standard of care, so I went on to continue to learn more and more about it. Okay. Of course, I came out ready to prep every DO in the world, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really very little of what dentistry is today. And the dentistry that we do in our office, it's very little of what we do. So the other thing too, do as many extractions as you possibly can with someone there to hold your hand, right? Extractions are huge. It's a low overhead procedure, right? You have a pair of forceps that you bought, and you have some gauze and some anesthetic, right? You're not putting resin in, you're not putting a crown on, you're not doing anything, right? And, you know, somebody comes in pain and you go, hey, that tooth needs to go, and you can get it out for them. You don't have to send them somewhere. It is a huge practice builder too, right? Last word of advice, when figuring out what you want to be different, right? And, you know, when you want to be different, when you're setting up your office, figure out what it will take for a patient. Think of it from the patient standpoint. If the patient is looking to come to your office or to come to a dentist in general, what are you going to do that is going to set you apart, that is going to make you different from every other office in the area, right? If you do everything the same as the guy down the street, then what's going to make Mrs. Jones choose you over the guy or the girl down the street, right? You got to have something, you got to do something that is going to make you different from everybody else, that's going to attract the patient to your office, all right? Any dentist out there can drill and fill, but figure out how to give a painless injection. That is the #1 practice builder you'll find, right? If you can give somebody an injection and they go, oh, doc, what'd you just do? And you can say, oh, I got you numb. And you see their eyes get real big, they are going to tell everybody that they know, right? Figure out a way to save your patient's time. For us, it's, you know, same-day crowns and things like that, and trying to make our visits as efficient as we can and get as much done as we possibly can. Because like I talked about earlier, you know, Mrs. Jones has to take a half a day off of work no matter what, if her appointment is 5 minutes or 3 hours, right? Mrs. Jones is taking a half day off to come to see you. Try to maximize the amount of stuff that you can get done for Mrs. Jones, okay? And make patients feel like family, you know, and some people don't want to do this, right? Some patients, Stella, some patients, some people just want to, you know, drill, fill, and go home. And I hope all of you listening are not that way, because it's, you're going to have a long, hard journey in dentistry, right? But when you make patients feel like family, and you have patients that come in and say, hey, how are your kids? Hey, can I see pictures of your kids? Or you're asking, hey, how was vacation? Things like that. It becomes a lot of fun, right? And being able to provide for patients like that and being able to have relationships like that with patients is a blast. That's all I got. I hope it was enough for what we had talked about, Cam. Any other questions, anything else you guys can think of?
When you coming back?
You tell me. I'm always more than happy to do these things. I would love for it to be, you know, in person, and you know, I would. You tell me what you want to hear about next, and I'll put a presentation together and talk about it.
Great.
I got another question. So as a fresh start business, around how much net production did you make yearly? And then was it within your initial goal that you had planned, or was it below or above?
So many people like tout production, and they got to do this by production. And in my mind, production is a fictitious number that people put out there to sound good, right? And keep up with me here, because you know, I can I would tell you that if we went off of our production number, we probably did $8 million worth of dentistry, right? But in the real scheme of things, when you factor in insurance, write-offs, and fees and things like that, the more important number to really, really focus on is collections. Okay. If you're an associate and they're going to pay you on productions, I would probably look at the production number because that would be great, right? But we pay our associate on collections, so any money that comes in the office is then what he gets paid on, right? I don't want to pay him on some fictitious number that doesn't make any sense to us, right? So say to make it sound a little bit better, or to explain it a little bit better, I guess, like our usual customary fee for a crown is $1,120, I think, or somewhere around there, right? But Guardian Insurance will only pay you $610 for that crown, or that's what their fee is. And then on top of that, Guardian Insurance then only pays half of that, and then the patient has to pay the other portion, right? So if I paid you 30% of $1,150, we'll say, or we'll call it easy math, I pay you 30% of $1,200, say our crown fee is, right? I'm paying you $360 on a procedure that we're only going to get $610 for, right? And it starts to really not add up after a while, right? Because then I'm not factoring in any overhead, any supplies, any other expenses, the lights, things like that. Everything that you have to pay ends up, a lot of times, I think our overhead is somewhere around like 70%, 72%. So if I was paying you $360 on a $610 crown, that doesn't make any sense at all for the practice. And the practice probably wouldn't survive very long if that's happening. So for me, the more important number as a practice owner to look at and to pay attention to is collections. And when we started out, our collection number far surpassed where I had ever anticipated it to be, especially the first 1-2 years. I think it was 13, 15. I think at the end of 2015, we did like $1.2 million. And I think our goal was to cross $1 million at like year 5. So we blew it out of the water, and for me, it was building a building at like year 15, and we built a building at year 7. So it's our trajectory has went, we started here and it was just like this. So it's been a crazy ride for sure.
And then I have another question that was submitted. So I know you're very picky when you hire, but how did your interview process go with hiring your whole staff?
So I don't call it an interview. I hate the word interview, right? I always tell people, hey, I want you to come in. I want you to meet the team. I want you to kind of see the office. And that's more so because I also want that person that's coming to the office to get a feel for if it's a place they want to be, right? You could come in and you could fake that you want to be there and you pretend like, hey, I need a job. But if it's not a place that you're going to want to work, it's not going to be fun for either one of us, right? And so that's another aspect where I've been very, very fortunate. A lot of our team members have literally just kind of fallen out of the sky, right? I think I've had to go through like the traditional hiring process for 4 people. But even with that, it was kind of that day I had them come in and hang out in the office, shadow, talk to the team members. I asked them a few like interview kind of questions, things like that. Obviously talked about, pay rate, things like that, all the questions that they normally have about it. But it was more of by the end of the day that they were there for their kind of shadowing day, we could tell, is it a person that we would like to join our team? Is it a person that they felt comfortable here? You can tell a lot after, a 4-hour time period about a person. So I really don't do like a traditional interview where you come in and we talk for an hour and then, okay, I'll see you later. It's more of a, hey, come in, hang out for a little while. And if they come in and hang out for an hour, then it's probably not going to work because they're not very invested in that time they want to hang out. Well, then they're probably not going to be very invested in their job either. Anything else? Anybody else?
I don't know if you can see the chat, just a bunch of thank yous.
Oh, I didn't. I don't even know where it is.
It's at the bottom.
I got you. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and like I said, I think somebody said, maybe jokingly, when you coming back, but really, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk about any part of our journey or anything else, any aspect of dentistry, any whatever. Cam, you tell me what you guys want to hear about, and I'll gladly talk about it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll definitely be reaching out again. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I definitely know you're super busy and you're enjoying your vacation. So us at the Student Wellness Coalition really appreciate it for your time. And, if anybody has any questions, you can message me or you can message Dr. Frazee.
Yeah. I don't know. I put my email address was on that last slide. I don't know if everybody got it, but you're more than welcome to share my email address as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
so much. It was fabulous.
You're very welcome.